I always believed that family was everything, that even through the worst arguments or the biggest tragedies, family members would always find their way back to each other, stitched together by shared blood and memories. When our father passed away, I thought that would be the moment that brought my brother and me closer. Instead, it was the event that tore us apart for good. The morning of the funeral, I sat quietly in my car, looking at the house we grew up in. It felt smaller somehow, less grand, stripped of its warmth, and filled with an echo of what once was. My brother, Jonathan, had already arrived and was pacing around the yard with his phone glued to his ear, barking instructions to someone about legal documents and property listings. I found it strange that he seemed more preoccupied with paperwork than the burial we were about to attend, but I brushed it off. Everyone processes grief differently, I reminded myself. At the service, I saw relatives I hadn't seen in years, all teary-eyed and murmuring their condolences. My father's casket sat surrounded by white roses, the kind he used to grow in the backyard. I said my goodbyes silently, letting the grief settle over me like a heavy blanket. But my brother remained distant, standing with his arms crossed, his eyes dry, occasionally checking his watch. After the burial, we returned to the family home for the reading of the will. I wasn't expecting anything grand our father had. Worked hard, but he had always been modest. What I didn't expect was to be completely left out. The lawyer opened the envelope and read aloud in a flat tone, "Everything house. Savings, stocks, even personal heirlooms was left to Jonathan." There was no mention of me, not even a note or a token keepsake. I felt my hands go cold, my stomach churning with confusion. Jonathan looked at me with a smug expression, almost challenging me to object. I didn't. I just sat there, stunned, replaying every memory I had of our father, trying to understand why. Why would he exclude me? What had I done? In the days following the funeral, I moved through the world like a ghost, unsure of what to think or feel. Friends tried to reach out, but I ignored most of the calls. My mind was caught in a loop of old memories, my dad teaching me to ride a bike, him helping me with school projects, his laugh when we watched comedies together. None of it made sense now. How could a man who loved me so much leave me with nothing? I decided to confront Jonathan. Not to fight over money, I didn't want it, but to understand. He was staying in the family home, now fully his, lounging like a king in a castle. When I arrived, he didn't even bother to greet me properly. "You want something?" he asked, flipping through a folder of documents. I stood there for a moment, studying his face. He looked cold, detached, not like the brother I grew up with. "I just want to know why," I said quietly. "Why would Dad leave me out of the will?" He smirked and leaned back in the chair. "Because he knew I'd take care of everything. You were always the sensitive one, the dreamer. He didn't think you had the spine to handle the business or the house." His words were like knives, but I didn't flinch. "That's not true," I said. "He always supported me. He came to my shows, read my stories. He was proud of me." Jonathan shrugged. He might have pretended. But when it came down to it, he trusted me. He knew I'd turn this place into something. I realized then that it was never about inheritance. It was about control, power, validation. Jonathan didn't just want the money. He wanted to erase my place in the family's history. I could have argued. I could have lawyered up and fought him in court. But I didn't. I walked away that day with nothing but my memories and a quiet kind of peace. He could have the house, the cars, the bank accounts. But he'd never have what mattered most, my father's true love and legacy. I returned to my apartment that night feeling strangely lighter, even though I had just been shut out of everything I thought I was entitled to. There was a moment where I almost cried, not because I lost money or property, but because I had finally accepted the truth. Not all family ties are unbreakable. Some were just ropes waiting to snap. I started packing up things that reminded me of my childhood. A photo of my dad holding me at the beach. A letter he had written me before my college graduation. All these little pieces felt more valuable than anything in that will. Jonathan could never buy these back. As I sifted through the boxes, I came across a leather-bound journal my dad's. I had forgotten I had it. He used to write in it every morning, recording his thoughts, frustrations, and reflections. I hesitated, then opened it. The pages were filled with scribbles and dated entries. And then I found something that shook me. An entry from 2 years before his death. It read, "I worry about Jonathan. He's become too obsessed with money. I want to believe he'll do the right thing when I'm gone, but I'm not sure. I've been thinking of splitting the assets differently. Maybe I'll leave instructions with the lawyer later." My hands trembled as I read on. He mentioned me often, how proud he was, how much he admired my resilience, how he wished we could all be closer again. But there was no final confirmation, no legal revision noted. It dawned on me that he might have planned to change the will, but never got around to it. I felt a mix of pain and relief. Pain that he hadn't done it in time. Relief that I hadn't imagined his love for me. That night, I sat by the window for hours, staring at the stars, holding that journal close. I whispered a soft goodbye to my dad, promising him that I wouldn't let bitterness rot my soul like it had done to Jonathan. I didn't need a courtroom to feel validated. I had my truth. Weeks turned into months. Jonathan began making changes to the family home, tearing down the rose garden, installing a pool, selling off antiques that had been in our family for generations. I saw the photos online. He was flaunting the renovations like trophies. Part of me ached every time I saw a new update, as if pieces of my childhood were being erased one by one. I kept to myself mostly, focusing on my writing. I published a short memoir about grief, betrayal, and family wounds. It didn't sell millions, but resonated with many. I received letters from strangers who said they saw themselves in my story. That gave me more peace than any inheritance ever could. One day, out of the blue, I received a letter from Dad's old lawyer. Enclosed was a sealed envelope labeled with my name, dated 6 months before Dad's death. My heart pounded. As I opened it, inside was a handwritten note. "If you're reading this, I didn't get to change the will. I'm sorry, son. I trusted Jonathan to share everything fairly. I hope he did. But no matter what happens, know that I love you deeply. I believe in you, and I'm proud of the man you've become." My eyes welled up. It wasn't wealth, but it was everything. Proof, love, a father's final blessing. I kept that letter close, framed it even. It reminded me that even when paperwork fails, love can still reach across the grave. I never replied to Jonathan's texts after that. Occasionally, he'd message me about family matters or real estate offers, but I'd seen enough. I wasn't going to be part of his version of family anymore. Life has a strange way of reshaping itself once you let go of old weights. After that letter from Dad, I stopped checking Jonathan's social media updates. I muted group chats filled with fake condolences and started pouring my time into things that actually healed me. I found a local grief support group, not the type that sat around crying into tea, but real people telling raw stories. Stories of siblings turning into strangers, of parents choosing favorites, of families shattering after funerals. I realized then that I wasn't alone. My story wasn't unique, but my choice was. Most people spent years chasing apologies, fighting in courtrooms, collecting cold victories that felt more like losses. I chose differently. I let my anger die. I didn't erase the pain, it stayed, but I let it live without growing. I turned my pain into prose, my memories into meaning. The journal entries from Dad became a chapter in my second book, and that book changed everything. It reached a niche but dedicated audience. A small publisher offered me a modest advance for future work. I wasn't rich, but I was fulfilled. I started giving talks about grief, not because I was some expert, but because people trusted the honesty in my story. And then, nearly a year after Dad's funeral, I heard news from an old neighbor that Jonathan's business was crumbling. Apparently, he had over-leveraged the estate, sold family properties for quick cash, and tried investing in ventures he didn't understand. I didn't gloat, I didn't call him, but I felt a sting of poetic justice. He had chased value but lost worth. People in town started to whisper, wondering how he could have let the legacy of such a respected man crumble so quickly. Meanwhile, I was being invited to speak in rooms where people wanted to listen, rooms where my father's spirit felt more present than it ever had in our old home. I remember standing on a stage once, reading the part of Dad's final letter where he wrote, "I believe in you," and the audience went silent. That moment felt like resurrection. My dad was there, not in stone or signature, but in words and truth. I smiled through tears, not for what I had lost, but for what I had finally understood. I no longer needed Jonathan's apology. I had made peace with silence. I was at peace, yes, but peace doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without rage. I kept a drawer in my home office with family photos, tucked away like little time capsules. Every so often, I'd take them out and just sit with them. One picture in particular haunted Mimi and Jonathan at age 10 and 12. Arms slung over each other's shoulders, matching bike helmets, huge grins on our faces. We were close once. Before the competition. Before Dad's quiet favoritism. Before we both learned how to hide our wounds behind pride. I tried to recall when things began to shift. Maybe it was in college when Jonathan took business courses and I studied literature. Or maybe earlier when Dad started taking him to meetings and left me with chores. Dad never said it out loud, but his expectations of us were divided along lines we never chose. Jonathan was the ear. I was the heart. And in the end, only one of those traits translated into a name on the will. Still, the old photo made me ache. Not for what we were now, but for who we had been. One day, I got a message from a mutual cousin. She said Jonathan was asking for my number. He had fallen into debt. Creditors were circling. The house, our family home, was on the market. I didn't reply, not out of cruelty, but out of boundary. My silence wasn't punishment, it was protection. Some bridges don't need to be burned, they just need to remain uncrossed. Later, I learned from another source that Jonathan had started drinking heavily. He'd become reclusive. People said he still talked about me, mostly bitterly, said I'd stolen attention, said Dad never respected his sacrifices. I shook my head at the irony. The inheritance he fought for had become his burden. The love I had earned quietly had become my strength. He never understood that what we inherit emotionally lasts far longer than any check. I wrote that line in my journal one night and sat with it until sunrise. Maybe someday Jonathan would read it too, if not from my hand, then from the stories that bore my name. Months rolled into another year, and I finally visited Dad's grave again. I brought fresh white roses, the kind he loved, and knelt beside the headstone. I spoke softly, telling him how things had unfolded, how Jonathan had stumbled, how I had grown, how, despite everything, I didn't hate him. I told Dad about the people who wrote to me, the ones who said my story helped them walk away from toxic families, who said they chose peace instead of war because they saw someone else survive it. I like to believe he heard me, that wherever he was, he felt the warmth of my voice. As I left the cemetery, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Dad was no longer buried in one place. He was everywhere I carried him. In my values, in my voice, in the choices I made daily. Later that month, I got a handwritten envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a short note. I messed up. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope you're okay. Jay, no apology, no excuses. Just a few human words from a brother who had once become a stranger. I stared at the letter for a long time. I didn't know what to do with it at first. I didn't reply, but I kept it. Not out of sentimentality, but because it marked something. A crack in the wall. Not all walls have to fall. Some just need a window. I wrote a story about that idea, two brothers, a grave, and a letter. It was published in a literary journal and won an award. I didn't tell anyone it was real, but in my heart, I knew. That was enough. People sometimes ask me if I ever regretted not fighting for the inheritance. My answer never changes. I didn't lose wealth. I inherited wisdom. I didn't lose a house. I built a home within myself. Now, years later, my life is quiet but full. I teach writing part-time. I mentor young authors who've been through family fractures, who carry stories in their hearts like shattered glass. I tell them to bleed on the page, but not in real life. To write what hurts, but live what heals. My apartment is filled with books, plants, and old photographs. I still keep Dad's journal on my desk. Every so often, I read a page at random, finding lines that hit harder with time. I never heard from Jonathan again after that short letter. Maybe he left the country. Maybe he got help. Maybe he didn't. I stopped wondering. That was my final act of letting go. People often romanticize forgiveness, painting it like a grand gesture or a moral victory. But real forgiveness is quiet. It doesn't shout. It simply lets you live. I forgave him long ago, not because he deserved it, but because I did. I deserve peace. I deserve space. I deserve to walk through the world without dragging dead weights behind me. And that's what I did. Dad's memory lives on, not in the house that was sold or the stocks that vanished, but in every word I write, every heart I reach, every moment I choose kindness over revenge. I end my talks these days with a simple phrase. Letting go isn't giving up. It's choosing to carry only what matters. That message was born from a moment of loss, but it has touched more lives than I ever imagined. Sometimes we win by walking away. Sometimes the quietest victories echo the loudest. And sometimes all it takes to reclaim your legacy is to refuse to fight over it.